All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, December 14th, 2021. In the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge enduring relationships between Indigenous peoples and the territories they traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have to this place, the land, the water, the air, and all that it live on, in, and above it. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we want to thank all the generations of Indigenous people who have taken care of this place and who continue to care for this place. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take actions towards real truth and reconciliation. Miigwech. Council, any declarations of pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest, conflict of interest, any such? Seeing none, we'll go to our first. We don't have any delegations, I believe, Madam Clerk, at this point. I have moved by Councillor Wianko, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved that Council adopts the consent agenda of December 14th, 2021 as amended to include 9A waste management update. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And I understand, police, according to my notes, we've had nobody register for the open forum.
Nobody, Your Worship.
That means we're going on to our first item, from Development Services in regards to a proposed dark sky bylaw amendment. And Mr. Avery, I see you on our screen. Welcome. And I believe this is your report.
Good morning, Your Worship. Or guess good afternoon now at this point.
If you're in our time zone.
I am, yes, I'm in the office, same time
like
zone. I'm here. Still feels like the morning. It's been a long day, but I'm here. So in terms of getting right to it, the report is essentially on amended dark sky bylaw proposal. I just wanted to provide a quick kind of background here with some of the reports that have previously come before COW. In September, Council staff were asked to review the dark sky bylaw and make any recommendations with regards to changes to enable better enforcement and to ensure that lighting within the municipality does not negatively impede on neighbors and property owners. Following that report in September, staff brought another report forward to COW in November with options to amend the current dark sky bylaw. At that time, as you may recall, staff were unable to present due to some time delays. However, Council did provide staff with further direction and comment regarding changes that they would like to see on the dark sky bylaw. Additionally, staff did receive 11 letters of support based on that November COW report that essentially stated their support for the changes that were recommended. So today's report, 2021-88, includes an amended bylaw with the proposed changes. So I'm just going to share my screen here if I'm able to. Maybe Karen, if I'm able to, it's showing disabled. Sharing screen is disabled. There we go. Just want to confirm that my screen is showing.
We can see it. Thank you.
Okay, so this bylaw, a part of the report 2021-88, is a proposed amended bylaw, dark sky bylaw. The proposed changes within this bylaw here is to include amendments on the Prohibition Section. Council may recall that I sent out an email with a version that was highlighted with some of the changes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scroll down here and just cover the highlighted portions, which are essentially the changes that are proposed. So as mentioned, Prohibition Section 2.10. The changes in this section will provide staff with the teeth to enforce the bylaw as requested. The current bylaw does not have offense language within these prohibition sections. Kind of referencing it to the current bylaw, these three sections here, laser source light, searchlights, and outdoor advertising offsite signs are in the current bylaw. However, these amendments essentially add the no person shall use or permit the use of. That essentially just creates the offense language to enable more efficient enforcement through the bylaw. Essentially, the current bylaw, dark sky bylaw, does not allow for that enforcement and only allows for orders to be made. So it gets a little bit tricky when we're talking about proper enforcement with the current bylaw. Any sort of further enforcement beyond an order needs to be facilitated through the provincial courts, which is both costly and resource heavy, as some of you may know. These three, as I mentioned, were the same, just this language was added. And then these additional three prohibitions, cutoff fixtures, light pollution, and light trespass, were added to the prohibition section. They were essentially taken out of the regulation section above that was more so a policy within the current bylaw, and now changed and amended to add some of this prohibition language that allows for staff to enforce things like light pollution, light trespass, and cutoff fixtures. Additional amendments have been made to the grandfathering and non-conforming luminaire section. This was a change to ensure that lights within the municipality are brought back into compliance by a certain date, aka grandfathered. That date was determined to be January 1st, 2026. All non-conforming lights that are deemed to be a public safety matter, including glare on waterways, were also included in there and are to be immediately brought back in to compliance. So you will see 2.12 grandfather non-conforming luminaires with the date in here by 2026. And then the public safety measure here, this is all new within this proposed amendments, essentially to help the township, being enforcement staff, deal with some of the trickier complaints when we're talking about public safety. As you may recall in some of the comments from previous meetings, the idea of lights on the waterways and specific docks were made a concern. Staff are still in the same conclusion that that is, in terms of lights on the water, that is a navigational issue through the federal government, Transport Canada. However, dealing with some of the issues that staff have seen out within the municipality when it comes to lights on water, if it is deemed a public safety concern, this section in terms of non-conforming luminaire could help support some of that enforcement with those challenges. So that's the two changes in the bulk of the bylaw that have been proposed. And scrolling down to the offenses and penalties section, section 4, offenses and penalties have been updated to ensure that enforcement and prosecution of the bylaw can be done by staff internally. The current bylaw, as I mentioned, really only has the powers of an order, and any additional enforcement being no one complies with the order or a dispute needs to be done through the courts. In short, these two changes here have been made to kind of update some of the offenses. Or the current bylaw recommends and states under the Municipal Act in terms of some of the prosecution that we could do through the courts. This section here, it was added in terms of some of the research that we did with other municipalities in their dark sky bylaw. This was just an easy section to put in to help support some more efficient prosecution. Scrolling down here to the last section, every person who contravenes any section or provision of this bylaw should be guilty of an offense as set out in Schedule 3. So one of the last changes that I can show here that have been made is essentially a set fine section within the proposed bylaw. And essentially that has been added and lays out 11 different offenses within this proposed bylaw, most of which are within that prohibition section. The changes that this will bring forward will allow staff the capability to lay Provincial Offence Act charges, offences, to fine individuals that are not complying with the bylaw. As mentioned earlier, some of this is obviously not possible in our current bylaw, and some of the fines, if the township or staff would like to seek fines for current offences, they need to do so through the provincial offence courts. And then lastly, Schedule 2, just above here, has been added that helps basically provide a visual representation of light trespass and light pollution. This will allow for two different things: better public education in terms of the residents, researching and viewing the bylaw to understand what these both these definitions and these prohibitions mean, and will help alleviate some of the issues that enforcement officers have dealt with in the past with regards to having to use interpretation on what is light trespass, what is light pollution. These visual representation, visual images were taken from an international light society, and from what staff can gather, most municipalities in our area that have a dark sky bylaw are using very similar, if not the exact same, visual representation and images that come from that international society. So that's kind of the bulk of the main changes. Some of the other things that I've scrolled past that have been highlighted are essentially just some of the edits, housekeeping edits that need to be made to the bylaw with the possible amendments coming through. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. So just wanted to note a couple of things. This amendment or proposed amendments to the current dark sky bylaw is brought before COW currently for comment. The resolution reads at this time that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approve the draft dark sky bylaw as presented, as amended. Essentially following this, if COW wishes to recommend that Council approve that, it would then be brought before Council for final approval. At that time, then the bylaw needs to be sent off to the Administrative Attorney General for approval with regards to some of the provincial offences set fines within that. And then further, it's staff's anticipation that if this bylaw is approved and finalized, possibly in early 2022, a public education campaign will be kind of designed and brought forward to educate the public on the changes that have been made to the bylaw. So that concludes kind of my presentation here. I could bring the bylaw back up on the screen here, but for now, that seems to be everything. I could open up to some questions.
All right, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate the presentation. I see Councillor Wianko is already ready, followed by Councillor Cooper with some comments or questions. Councillor Wianko.
I suspect Councillor Cooper and I have the same question. I'm concerned about this issue of compliance by January the 1st, 2026. I think that's a little late. If this bylaw comes into force, you say sometime early next year, maybe by the spring, why can't we do it in a year? Like some of these lights out in the bay for navigation, that means they're going to hang around for another 3 years, which is really not acceptable, I'm sure, to the people in Georgian Bay. And I've got a few around here that I wouldn't mind having looked at. It's just a matter of unscrewing a light bulb or something like that. So why are we taking 3 years and not just 1 year?
Mr. Avery.
Thank you. Through your worship, to Councillor Wianko. That's a good question. So that date that's been determined on the proposed amendment right now was a date picked by staff that was seemed to be deemed reasonable. Council or COW at this time has the ability to recommend any date that they seem reasonable. What I will say in some of the research that we did on other municipalities' dark sky bylaws is that it ranged from 5 years all the way up to 10 years. So it really just depends on the direction that members wish to go. But I think at a minimum, it would be ideal to leave that at a 12-month, 1 year time frame on the basis that if any sort of matter has to go before court with reference to non-compliance, I think a justice of the peace would determine that a 1 year at a minimum would be a reasonable date.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Bocheck.
Thank you, Mayor Kritzer and Cody. A great report, and thank you for all the work on this. It's a very important issue. And remarkably, I happen to agree with Councillor Wianko. No, I'm kidding. I do agree with him, and I would like to see it a much shorter timeline, particularly, and that's why I was going to ask this question. The way I sort of heard it from you, but not necessarily read it, was that if it was a safety issue, it also would not be changed until 2026. Was that your intent?
Through your worship to Councillor Cooper, the way that the bylaw currently reads with that grandfather non-compliant luminaire section, it's two separate kind of pathways there. Is that all current luminaires that are deemed to be non-compliant need to be brought back into compliance by X date. If so, that's one. Two, if a light is found to be and deemed to be a public safety issue, staff have the ability at that time to order a change of that bulb or that light or that luminaire fixture on the basis of it being a public safety issue.
In other words, you're saying even though we put 2026 on it, as it pertains to safety, and I'm talking about navigation because this is a big part of what I've been trying to fend off or deal with, and you're saying that could be dealt with virtually immediately. In other words, if somebody's polluting a waterway next June, they could be the offender could be visited, and the demand would be to take the light down or turn it off or whatever. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct, on the basis that it is deemed a public safety issue. So
All right.
if it's deemed a non-compliant luminaire, being, it's deemed to have light trespass or light pollution, that wouldn't be subject to this provision in terms of the grandfathering. It would only be subject to a luminaire that is deemed to be a public safety issue.
Thank you for that. Sorry, Mayor, I just wanted to finish this off very briefly. And that is that, so that sounds fine, but I still would like to see this happen a little bit more quickly. And I think you said it could be done perhaps in a year versus 3 years from now. So I would encourage that. The other quick question I have is, just want to be confirming a laser light that you're referring to. Is that like the laser lights that we're hearing about that people are shining on aircraft and causing them to crash and so on? Is that what it is? I don't have any laser lights, so I'm not sure I understand what it is exactly. Thank you.
Through your worship, to Councillor Cooper, yes, that is correct. Those defined laser source lights that you're mentioning, that is the light indeed.
So that could be a safety issue too.
Correct.
Crashing airplanes.
Correct.
Before I go to Councillor Bocheck, just one point of clarification. Do you have the authority to deem something a hazard, or do you need somebody else to deem it a safety item, safety issue?
Your worship, so in terms of the bylaw and interpretation of the sections within the bylaw, it's the officer's interpretation that would deem something to be a public safety issue. Example, if I was on, say for example, if the township received a complaint of a light and a resident wanted to say that it's a public safety issue, that would not deem it a public safety issue. It would have to be an officer's interpretation on that matter that would deem that.
And you are one of those officers?
That is correct.
Thank you. Councillor Bocheck, sorry about the interruption, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
That's okay. It's Kyle. You're allowed to interrupt.
I gave myself permission.
Yeah. My understanding is that in a case like this, the fines are set by district court. And I've had some experience in this with a dark sky policy, not in this township, but in another township. And the bylaw officer gave me a notice to appear. And because we don't, as a township, we don't set the fines. The fines are set by the province or the district. And I had to appear in district court with no set fine on my ticket, just a notice to appear. And then, if I had been in non-compliance, I would have been fined, and the court would have put a number to that. In my case, I wasn't, so I didn't know what the fine was, but I'm just wondering, my first question is, how did we come up with this $300 figure that is across the chart? And really, is that, does it really mean anything? Because my understanding is we don't set our fines, even for parking, we don't set the fines.
You're muted, Mr. Avery.
Through your worship, sorry to Councillor Bochuk, through the current attachment that's in front of you, essentially the proposed amendments, the set fine section is included in there. How that works is that the amendments, once approved by council, so for example, these fines, the set fines are approved. This bylaw is then sent to the Ministry of Attorney General for approval, and then sent back to the district for approval. And essentially it needs to go through a couple different steps of approval process before the township is able to enforce that and issue offenses under that. So we do have the ability to recommend those set fines, being the $300 that's proposed. Whether the province or the district courts wish to dispute that or change that is a possibility. But based on the research that was done by staff, the $300 mark, it seems to be across the board for most dark sky bylaws, where the offense, set fine offenses are $300 straight down. That's many different municipalities that we looked at. Again, members have the ability to recommend or make any changes as they wish to those set fines if they wish to make them higher or lower, or not consistently $300. But yes, we do have the ability to recommend that. And that's based on, as I said, my research. That's what I think staff think is the best approach.
Okay, that's good. I do have a second question. In Schedule 2, if you look to your report, in Schedule 2, there's a section that says light standards. I happen to live on a municipal road that has light standards. They're of the Cobra style LED. They don't comply. Does this mean that we're going to have to change all the street lights in this township to comply? And that's going to be, they were $2,200 a piece, I believe. Preferably, we'd like to see the light standards taken off our street, because we don't want street lights. We can't see the stars. We can't see anything because of these things. And we hate light pollution here. So we have these street lights in our survey, as do most surveys. Now, the Oak Bay survey has their own lighting, which has the umbrellas over top of them, so they don't cast light upwards. But on Hillside Drive and a bunch of other roads within this township, we have our own concerns that our lights are not going to comply with this, and it's going to be very expensive to take them out, considering this council approved to have them all changed out to the LED Cobra style at a huge amount of money.
Through your worship, to Councillor Bochuk, I can be honest with you, I don't have an answer to that. Based on the research that I've done so far on the proposed amendments that are before COW at this time, I haven't had the time or resources at this point to do a study of the municipality and the current municipal lights that we have available. That's a conversation that I could have with the Director of Operations to kind of assess the current lighting fixtures that are out there within the municipality. But based on the bylaw currently, obviously the current light fixtures that you're mentioning are in compliance. Based on the recommended proposed changes here, it does appear that it would not be compliant. However, we can add a section within the current or the proposed bylaw to allow municipal or district lighting to be exempt from the bylaw. That's also a possibility.
Sure. My understanding, by getting this report from you from when we requested it, the concern from all of council and the mayor was waterfront properties. It was definitely a concern of all of ours: navigation, lights on docks, flashing lights on docks, whatever. So I thought this document was going to pertain to that, waterfront properties only. But when you've included the entire township in here, I think you're going to find some other issues along the way. So yeah, I would like you to get back to us with an answer on these streetlights within the township. But I have really no reservations, or everything seems to be good in this, and I'm certainly not going to hold it up. And as a cow resolution, I think this should go to council. So thank you for the report, Cody.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. And thank you, Cody, for the report, quite extensive. My concern is, I'm pretty sure there were a number of complaints that were lodged through last summer from lakefront properties over the lighting issue in a number of different areas. If we were to approve this and council were to be okay with it and we were able to put it into action, would you revisit those complaints, or would they have to be resubmitted?
So through your worship, to Councillor Jarvis, in terms of the conversation that we had previously with the grandfathering and non-compliant luminaire section, as mentioned, there's two different kind of paths. If there is a previously existing complaint that has been made, and the bylaw now gets changed, and that in particular, that matter that was maybe previously not a contravention that now is currently, I believe it would fall into that grandfathering case. And at that point, staff would issue some sort of letter or order to have those luminaires changed by X date, being that grandfathering date that we decide on. If, for example, and previously mentioned, if it is deemed to be a public safety matter at that time, then a different approach could be taken.
Okay. Appreciate that. And yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hazelton.
Cody, thank you so much for bringing this forward. I think you've done a great job. Delighted to hear that you feel that this is something that can be enforced by you as a bylaw enforcement officer. I tend to agree with a couple other councillors who have suggested that 2026 is kind of a long way out. And I would certainly encourage us to bring that date forward. There was one thing that I was curious about. In Schedule 3, you have two items in there, number 10 and number 11, where you're essentially dealing with uncooperative people. And I'm wondering, is $300 the right number? Or if somebody is choosing to be uncooperative, shouldn't there be an opportunity to put a much more substantial penalty in place? And since you have to go through this process, it sounds like you've got a multi-step process. Changing that number to say $1,000 for hindering or obstructing staff, or $1,000 penalty for failing to comply. Wouldn't those be something that we would want to ask for at the beginning of this process to truly give you teeth as you attempt to enforce the bylaw?
Thank you, through your worship, to Member Hazelton. That is a good point. As I previously mentioned, based on the research that was done, the set fine amount at $300 consistently down the column was pretty consistent with most other municipalities. As I mentioned, members have every ability to recommend these changes. I did not see through my research any sections or I guess to say items within set fines where they were substantially higher than the other offenses. So what I could recommend is that it would be uncommon based on my research to do that. However, it definitely would provide more enforcement ability.
If I could, one final question. Back to your grandfathering thing. So you've got a date in here, September 14th, 2015. And anything prior to that is considered grandfathered, and that would have to be made compliant by some future date. But could you just please confirm with me that any luminaire installed after September 14th, 2015 would be required to immediately comply with this bylaw?
So through your worship, to Hazelton, to confirm, so that September 14th date is when the current dark sky bylaw was created. So any luminaire that's been installed post that, from basically September 14th to current, would not need to be changed immediately. That would then need to be a luminaire that would need to be changed as per the date that we decide on for that grandfathering section 3 within 2.12. So to confirm, any luminaire that was essentially installed pre-September 14th, 2015 would be truly considered a grandfathered luminaire. Anything between September 14th, 2015 and current, or until this current bylaw is approved, or proposed bylaw is approved, would then need to be changed as per the date requested in this bylaw.
So we've had a fair number of complaints about dark sky lighting over the last year or two. And unless I'm missing something here, unless we change that date of 2026, people are not going to see any fix in the problem until 2026 or until some new date in there, unless something can be deemed a public safety hazard. Is that right?
So through your worship, yes, that is correct. As we've discussed in this meeting, that date of 2026 is at the discretion of members here to make a recommendation. As I stated, it's staff's recommendation that at a minimum we have a 1 year based on the idea of matters going to the courts, and a date deemed reasonable by the justice of the peace could be argued if it's anything less than a year. And just reiterate again, based on the research that was done by staff, that date of compliance, it was anywhere between 5 and 10 years. So we can change to 1 year. I have no problems with that. It's just the recommendation that needs to be made.
So your 1 year starts when?
So the 1 year, so if we had that section changed, that every person that has a grandfathered luminaire must be made compliant to this bylaw by January 1, for example, 2023. Once this amended bylaw gets approved by council and then confirmed by the province and district, it would come into effect, and then that time would start ticking.
Okay, so that would apply to anything, everything out there, except if something was deemed a public safety hazard or whatever concern. Sorry, if you were to deem it a public safety concern, you could require an immediate change.
That is correct.
Thank you. Understand.
I'm a little bit confused, and maybe I misunderstood you, Mr. Avery, but the current bylaw was put in place 6 years ago. September 2015, I believe you said.
Correct.
Okay. And we are, in this bylaw, we're not changing that much as far as what, in other words, 6 years ago, we said we want dark sky lighting. Now we say we want dark sky lighting, but we want to give you a little more teeth to enforce it. So I would have thought that any light installed after 2015 that was offside, that's offside now, probably would have been offside in 2015 or 2016 or 2018, whenever it was installed. And if it was offside then, and it's offside now, to me, that's not grandfathered, because that was put in after what is now the current bylaw. And we're not changing that much as far as, I'll call it, light design is concerned between what we had 6 years ago and what we have now. So I'm wondering why you couldn't go out this summer, for instance, go to a cottage and say, those lights that we know you installed 2 years ago, because prior to that you didn't own the property, they're offside and you should remove them now. Why can't you do that?
Your worship, so that similar to planning type bylaw infractions, when an officer, myself, gets out on site due to a complaint and deems a light to be non-compliant, essentially we treat it, so like I said, similar to a planning matter where the individual has to provide evidence or proof that the light is not a contravention. So for example, an individual would have to prove that they installed that light at a certain date and provide enough evidence to justify that and to satisfy myself, the officer,
Mhm.
So I believe in most cases, if I'm answering your question correctly here, in most cases, someone for the most part is not going to be able, unless they have proof that that light was installed pre 2015, it would be considered a violation. So I think
Okay.
for the most part, the enforcement through this grandfathering and non-conforming luminaire section will be sufficient, and it'll help tackle some of the challenges that we've seen in the past.
And one other point of clarification, then we'll do a second round here, I think, because I already see a hand up. You did explain to us, I think earlier, that we have these $300 fines, but it could be $300 per day that they're offending after they've been told not to. Is that correct?
So your worship, yes, that is correct.
So somebody who's being a pain in the butt, I mean, I am all in favor of increasing a fine for hindering or obstructing staff because, I mean, to me, that's just protecting our staff, and I think that's an important thing to do. But, failed to comply with if any of these other ones can be applied on a daily basis, well, then if people are being difficult, guess what? After a couple of weeks of being difficult, we're now in the thousands of dollars of fines. My math says that every week is $2,000. I'm rounding. So that's the fine could grow very quickly for somebody who's being difficult.
Through your worship, yes, that is correct in terms of staff's approach, in terms of providing a property owner with an order to change a luminaire that's not in compliance with the bylaw. We'd give reasonable time to do so. For example, 30 days. It gets a little bit trickier when we get into some winter months and people, seasonal residents and so on. But that measure within the bylaw would be a kind of resort to go to if we're hitting a brick wall in terms of compliance.
Having said that, I think education, I don't see this bylaw as being a moneymaker whatsoever. I'm really just hoping it encourages everybody to be better neighbors and quit blinding people that aren't on their property. If they want to have lights inside their home that are ridiculously bright, I guess hopefully they draw their curtains so they don't blind us and away we go. But I just think that we have to remember that there is that potential if somebody is choosing to be difficult, that you can remind them of the cost per day. With that, we'll start round two. Councillor Wianko, followed by Councillor Cooper, please.
Just a couple of things, and it's too bad that the building department isn't here, but my understanding is that if you get a permit to build something that will have lights on the outside or whatever, I think right in the application or the building permit, there's a requirement to meet dark sky requirements. So I wouldn't mind having some kind of confirmation that the building department is insisting that new construction complies with the dark sky. So that would be one thing. I don't know if anybody can confirm that today, but I wouldn't mind having that confirmed. The other thing too is that Cody, you indicated that you're qualified to determine what's considered a hazardous light situation, but are you qualified to determine if a lighting situation is offensive to somebody? My opinion of offense may be different than your opinion of offense. So I guess is your opinion over mine that works? And so how does that work? And who's going to come out? You can come out here at nighttime or visit these properties at nighttime to determine this? How does that all work?
All right, we'll start with CEO Gunby because she wants to reply, and then Mr. Avery, and then we'll go to Dr. Spilla because I've seen he's appeared as well. CEO Gunby.
Yes, thank you. So I just want to clarify that it would not be the building department who would verify that a permit does not comply with dark sky lighting, because it is a planning department bylaw, as you can tell by Cody being the one presenting it. So they would be the one looking at it when they review it. So I'll let Cody answer the rest of your questions.
Mr. Avery.
Thank you. To Wianko, in terms of enforcement for any township bylaw, as the appointed municipal law enforcement officer for the municipality, officers have the ability to interpret the bylaws. And in terms of defining or interpreting if there is an offense within the bylaw, it would be my interpretation as the officer that would be on site. As many of you may know, a lot of the times an officer's interpretation of a contravention and a property owner's interpretation are often different. And that's where the court comes into play. And if anything wants to be talked about and resolved, the courts are there for a reason. However, if a contravention within a bylaw is perceived from an officer on site and an offense, for example, a fine or a ticket is issued or a charge is laid, it's ultimately the officer's discretion that does that.
Thank you. Dr. Espilla.
Thank you, Mayor Councillor. I'm going to comment on 2 points here that have been raised recently by council. So as CAO Gunby pointed out, any matter related to lighting falls under the jurisdiction of the planning department side of development services. And that's why we're bringing it up. That's why our teams brought the report forward. With respect to any building permit matter that comes up, we do a review of those permits with respect to anything that's in the zoning bylaw and any other planning bylaws for that matter, to ensure conformity with the direction that we've received from council. And the second issue that came up was, would staff be going out in the dark to enforce any lighting complaints? And the short answer is no. And that's from 2 perspectives. And I have consulted with the chief building official on this matter. There's the safety concerns and there's the resources concerns. If there is an emergency matter, an emergency safety issue at nighttime, there are other alternatives such as the Ontario Provincial Police that may be more appropriate to handle such issues.
All right, thank you. Councillor Wianko, the follow up before we go to Councillor Cooper.
Well, okay, so I have a complaint. You know, if an individual has a complaint and you're saying that the bylaws office is not going to come out at nighttime, it can't come out in the daytime because they really can't see the light pollution. So how does the staff get involved if they don't come out at nighttime and see the problem? Sorry, I just missed that one.
Through you, Mayor Councillor, quite simply, we don't have the proper tools to go out to conduct site visits on islands in the middle of the night throughout our township. And as the councillor noted, it is going to be a challenge to enforce. It's also worth noting, though, in the context of this report, as Mr. Avery's noted, the number of overall complaints that are received on this topic are low. And the primary approach on this one is to address through education and encouraging people to be good neighbors.
I would also think that if you went on site, you could tell by the nature of the fixture whether it was capable of breaching the bylaw or not. You can, I mean, you look at those examples of luminaires, some of them, it's quite obvious. The bulb sticks well below the cover and it can clearly shine light onto the water, for instance, or onto the roadway or what have you. So I would think that if a complaint is filed about Island X having lights that have blinded the boats going by, and Mr. Avery or one of his colleagues were to go out on site, they look at these fixtures and they say, those, if they were turned on at night, could blind boats. I think you could be able to tell that without it being nighttime. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Councillor, and a very good point I was about to raise as well. Is just go and look at the light, especially if, for example, if it's a spotlight and blasting out over the water, it's pretty clearly going to be a big problem. If it's a floodlight that's shining down, yeah, it's not really going to be that much of an issue. You might light up a back deck where you can get off the deck or something without tripping. But that wasn't really my question, but I thought your advice was very good. And I think Cody, I think you could, in many cases, make a determination as to whether something was problematic. But just sort of, and I hate to sort of bring up a personal issue, but I have a set of docks that sit on a channel. It's not a big boat channel or a marked channel, but it's occasionally, very rarely used, but during the day it's used a bit. But at night, not too much, but nevertheless, I have docks that go out into almost 100 feet out into the channel. And so I have very low light solar lights. They're actually sit right on the deck, so you can hardly, so you don't trip over them. But they do give off a little bit of light, but it's actually a safety issue. So it's sort of the opposite of what we're talking about here, so that a boat doesn't come along and smash into the docks. I don't know that you can write this in here. I'm just pointing out that from a safety perspective, there may be a reason for a little bit of light. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't know if you want to comment, Mr. Avery.
Through your worship, yeah, I think I can't answer that question in terms of can it be in there, can it not? I think based on the research that was done, and I actually reached out to a few different municipalities within the Muskoka district and spoke with some of the officers. That provision around lighting on docks and within waterways specifically is not something that any municipality's bylaw restricts. I think it all comes back to being a federal issue when we're talking about lighting or any sort of obstruction within a federal regulated waterway. I think it's smart for the township not to get into that game of regulating lighting within waterways. I think it comes back to as well a public safety issue. The township can work with a property owner if it's deemed a public safety issue. However, as mentioned in the report, a handful of complaints that were received last summer, ones that were thought to be an issue when it comes to lighting on the water were referred to Transport Canada.
Chief Undum, did you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to let Council know that that issue has been brought forward in the past with Karina and myself looking at it, along with the OPP, that we've been out looking at it. And one of the big concerns that you'll be running into in the next little while will be boilers out on the water, and they have to have them lit up so that somebody doesn't thinking that they're on ice and come across and hit open water. So that was deemed by the OPP. They did some research for us on that, and we were advised that we can't do any enforcement with that.
Okay, thank you. And I do think there's a significant difference that most people will appreciate. If somebody has a little solar light in the corner of their dock, that's very different than somebody having a spotlight on a pole shining down on the whole dock and the water all around it. I'm sure all of us who have boated at night have experienced both. Okay, Councillor Hazelton, please.
Thank you. So we have a unique township. We have a unique water access township. We have challenges in enforcing bylaws that other townships don't have. And certainly I would welcome any strategies that staff can come up with that would make it effective. I would ask Cody, if I could, if you were to receive photographs of examples of light pollution, is that something that you can take action on?
Through your worship, the simple answer is yes. However, I think based on some of the comments that were previously mentioned, a site visit during daylight hours would also be a part that would be required in terms of my ability to, for example, lay a charge or issue a fine. But based on pictures that have been received in the past for complaints, I would be able to act on those. I think the most important part to mention is that in previous complaints that were received, complaining about a light that it appears to not be in compliance with the bylaw. It was staff's approach to contact the property owner and first have a public education approach to understand the challenges that they have and kind of educate on the requirements for the bylaw. And then following that, if non-compliance is not being sought, then township staff can then lay fines, charges, all that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
All right. Councillor Wianko, you had another remark you wanted to add in?
I'm just concerned that, like Cody, I guess, would be a star witness if he had to go to court. And what I'm hearing is that he himself, being a star witness, has never witnessed the light at nighttime. And I don't know how comfortable I would be as in the township or even as a witness saying, oh, wow, this light is a hazard, but I've never seen it at nighttime. So help me have a star witness and not have to witness at nighttime. I just have a
I'd
problem.
happily give Cody a trip on the water.
Well, this is it. Like, I think he should. And again, we have some on land too, so they can drive to some of these things. But I would think that Cody would want to actually see the light at nighttime in order to be a competent witness.
Through your worship, to comment on that, Councillor Wianko, that's truly the challenges that our municipality brings, is some of these waterfront properties. The current bylaw as it stands is more of a policy driven bylaw, and we've seen from past reports and some of the comments that council's made that there isn't the enforcement measures there. That's why these changes are being brought forward in front of you. I think the reality is, and it's been mentioned in previous meetings as well, is that we could have a bylaw that has teeth to enforce, but sometimes due to the geographical constraints, the natural constraints of our municipality, sometimes it just can't be enforced fully. However, I, as an officer, would feel comfortable based on a site visit and picture proof that a fixture or non-conforming luminaire is not in compliance to issue those fines or orders or whatever it may be.
And I think we're very fortunate with both our bylaw officers that they have been able to get compliance from our residents 8 or 9 times out of 10 just through persuasion and education.
Oh, yeah, they have.
And I think, the point of our policy is to share this information so that everybody understands and, sure, and I'm sure both our bylaw officers, allow the person the excuse of, well, I didn't know, as long as they follow it immediately with, and I will change. And I think, fortunately, we haven't hired bylaw officers and said they have to earn their salary in fines collected ×2, or else they're fired, because otherwise we defeat the whole purpose. But I do think, if I may take it on, I think education is key. I would love to see a one-pager produced that goes out in the, for instance, in the property tax bill in March or whenever it's mailed out, to share with all property owners saying, we have a night sky bylaw and we want all residents to respect it, with a few examples. What I'd like to do now is let's see what amendments we want. The one thing I heard right away, or at least repeatedly rather, was 1926 is too long. Are we looking for 1924? Are we looking for 1922, 23? Councillor Jarvis, let's get a date on that 26 figure, please.
I'm not going to go to a specific date, except to say maybe we should have 1 year from the date of enactment of the bylaw.
So that would be early 2023, shall we say?
Yeah.
And for considering that probably still 3/4 roughly of our properties are seasonal, whether it's February or April won't make much difference, because they probably won't do it until the spring anyway. But hopefully they'll do it even sooner.
Mayor Kutzer, if I could just suggest that it not
Please.
be 19, it should be 20.
That's a good point. Glad somebody's paying attention.
Just saying.
I think that's, I'm presuming that both our clerk and our bylaw officers clued in that I was like, 100 years behind myself.
The only other thing I would say in terms of enforcement, we do have Coast Guard and police going by a lot of these places, and I think, Cody, that we could liaise with those vessels that are out there, and I bet they know all about the places are causing some light pollution. So just as an aside, thank you.
Councillor Wojcik?
Yeah, just more reason to listen to Councillor Cooper in his comments a couple of months ago saying we could sure use a drone. A lot of video evidence from a drone camera, let me tell you.
And I'm sure Mr. Avery would accept such evidence. Okay, we've agreed that 1926 should become early 2023. Any other change? I mean, we had some conversation around the fines. Do we want to recommend any of the fines be changed or leave it as is for now? Councillor Jarvis, is that?
I'm agreeing. I think we should leave it as is. Your comment about the fine escalating, of course, daily should be more than enough to get people off their butts and changing things. So I think we're okay. The idea that we have our bylaw officers being accosted by residents is rather would be disconcerting, and maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to raise that part of the fine structure. But otherwise, I think $300 a day should be enough for people to be encouraged to make the changes.
Councillor Wojcik?
Just a off topic here, a quick question, Cody. Would there be a provision to apply for a permit to break this bylaw? A temporary permit? I'm just thinking, if you have a wedding with a tent and you have all the big lights set up for a wedding at night, you certainly don't want to be breaking the law. So there should be a way to go to the township and when you ask for the zoning permission to put up a tent, an event tent, that there would be also a provision for a temporary stay of the dark sky policy during that event.
So through your worship, there is a section within the bylaw that allows for residents, property owners to submit information. Currently, it is designed more so for substantial new developments involving outdoor lighting, but it's very similar to a what you could call a permit process or an exemption from council. As the bylaw reads right now, there is also a section for temporary events and advertising. So they kind of mesh a little bit, but an exemption for temporary events can be sought out through the bylaw.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
And just to note, sorry, that's in the current bylaw. That's not an amendment that's been made.
Dr. Espilla?
Through you, Mayor Coots here. Is that something that the committee or council would like to see go back to council should an amendment be sought, or is that something that would be more desirable to be delegated to administration to process?
Councillor Wojcik?
Chris, currently, you have to apply to the township if you're going to have an event or put up a tent for a wedding, mainly because you're driving big stakes into the ground. You could hit hydro, you could hit whatever. So the application always went to the planning department, and there was never any incidents where you didn't grant permission. But I'm just thinking if you tagged on this dark sky policy along with that permitting process, just saying for the event period of 12 hours that you're going to have this, that the dark sky policy would not be in effect or something like that. That's my only concern. I have a wedding coming up this September.
Congratulations.
To my son. And we will have it lit up.
Councillor Jarvis?
A comment to Councillor Wojcik that if you drove a stake in the ground and hit the hydro line, we wouldn't have to worry about dark sky lighting. Just my observations. I'm agreeing with you though. I think if there's a venue for applying for an exemption, temporary exemption, that makes sense.
Yeah, after all, the next topic we're going to have is fireworks, and that certainly doesn't involve a dark
Yeah,
sky.
section 2 in the bylaws, 2.11, request for exemption for temporary events and advertising. It's in there.
Any other comments? All right. Moved by Councillor Jarvis, second by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole recommends the Council approve the draft dark sky bylaw as amended to change the 2026 to early 2023. I don't know what extra.
Can I suggest compliance required from 1 year of the date of passing?
Okay.
That's the wording.
Okay, perfect. As amended to include compliance with within
Required.
1 year of passing.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor? And that is carried. Mr. Avery and whoever worked with you, Ms. Prasad, thank you very much for this. And let's do it all over again in regards to fireworks.
Thank you.
Okay, so good afternoon, committee and chair. I'm here to talk today about the proposed fireworks bylaw. So last month at COW, we spoke about the noise bylaw, and during that discussion, there was quite a few concerns brought forward from the committee members about restricting fireworks to certain days. And I've also heard that from residents as well over the years of being here. So I went back and I looked at the surrounding area bylaws in regards to fireworks. I felt that it was better to be on its own separate bylaw because there are lots of things that we can talk about when speaking about fireworks, not just the noise portion. So basically, just to dive right into the bylaw, it breaks it down to two main categories of fireworks. So there's consumer fireworks. So that's basically what me and you would buy to light off. They're low hazard. And then there's display fireworks that are set off by a licensed person, and they have to have a permit to do so. So within that, the consumer fireworks. So basically I put it so and looked at the municipalities who did it as well. And that's what committee members asked for, to have it restricted down to holidays. So basically the way it's written is it's restricted to Victoria Day, Canada Day, Labor Day, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, and New Year's Day. And then we had 3 days prior to those days and 3 days after. The reason that was done, and it's done in other municipalities as well, is to allow for things like weather sometimes don't cooperate for events or schedules. If someone, let's say, works nights on New Year's Eve, then the next day would be their celebration. So it kind of gives that little bit of leeway for everyone to enjoy those holidays with their fireworks. The rest of the consumer fireworks sections has people, you can't set them off if you're under the 18 years of age. You can't set them off in a dangerous way. And we also restricted the time. So we're hoping that will bring that down to a minimum so they're not going off all night. So the times would be from dusk until 11 for all the holidays except New Year's Eve, which would be till 1 p.m. obviously because of New Year's at 12. So we changed that. And we also have to have a property owner permission. So if someone was to let off fireworks and someone didn't know, then you have to make sure that it has that permission of the property owner, or they themselves have to be setting them off. So that's kind of the consumer fireworks section. And then it breaks back down into display. So display, you have to have a licensed person to obtain a permit from the township, and they have to get approval from the chief fire official. This practice is currently already happening, and they need our approval, or fire chief's approval, in order to purchase their fireworks. So we just thought, you know what, we might as well put this all in a bylaw, then it's all written out for everybody as to how the process looks. So these applications can only be given to someone who has a valid display supervisor certificate and must be submitted within 30 days of the event. We did that. It was the other municipalities had longer because sometimes we've got them, the day or before, and we don't want to push staff to make sure they have appropriate time to assess the whole situation. For those display fireworks can only be set off during the days and times specified in the permit. And the permit can be suspended or revoked if the fire chief or chief fire official deems it to be dangerous, or for some reason, they feel that it's not a good time to do that. And we've had display fireworks and the fire danger rating is too high, so then they get canceled. So that's just kind of there as a precautionary. Then similar to Cody's chat about the wedding, there's a section that allows council to make an exemption. I would see these for things like a wedding or a family event that is obviously not on the days of the holidays to do consumer fireworks. Then they would be able to be approved by council with or without conditions, or they could be not approved by council as well. And that's just an example that I kind of thought might be a problem for people putting this in. I also put in a set fine schedule similar to Cody's as well, that had consumer fireworks. Anything that they did in a prohibition of that section would be $500, and anything with display would be $800, just because we feel that, they're professionals, they're licensed, they should know. So if they were to do something to break the bylaw, I felt the fine should be a little higher for those situations, and hopefully we don't have those, but if we do, then they're there to help us do that. I do suggest that if this does make it through to council and is approved and put in, that we work with Jen and Trish to get a lot of social media and messaging out, so that this is made aware to everyone, because this is a big change, and it's common in lots of areas around us, but it is new to Georgian Bay. So I would love to see, like Mayor Councillor said, to put it out in the tax bill. That's a great idea to bring that, to light that this is changing. So that's kind of what I have for a quick presentation. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
I suspect you're going to get a few questions, and we're going to start with Councillor Bocek, followed by Cooper, followed by Wianko.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the report. Very informative. My comments are not made to be funny or entertaining, but I see that your schedule for fireworks is based on government holidays and Christian beliefs. And I really don't see a purpose in that. Christmas is celebrated by different people, different religions, different celebrations. This kind of pigeonholes you into government assigned holidays and religious beliefs is what you're allowing fireworks to go off of. So rules. There's rules. We got rules. We keep making up more rules every day here in this council. This is cottage country, man. You try and escape the city and come up here and have a little bit of fun, and all of a sudden there's rules on top of rules on top of rules to keep the people from the city from doing what they're doing at their cottage. So I am not in favor of this bylaw. It's come up many times while I've been sitting on council. I think it's flawed. I think it's not necessary. And I think our public have a right to know who keeps putting laws in place to stop them from doing what they want to do. And so I'm requesting to the clerk that we have a recorded vote on this, since we're in open session. And I will not be supporting this bylaw. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Councillor, and I will respond to Councillor Bocek in a minute, but I just wanted to make a couple of comments about the sort of days selected and so on. And I did understand the comment about Christmas, but I think we missed, for example, one holiday weekend, the August long weekend. I don't see that there. And that's when a very high percentage of the residents are in town, so to speak. So I would suggest that it could read along the lines of Victoria Day, Canada Day. What do we call the August long weekend? I can't remember, but anyway, the August long weekend, Labor Day. And I hear the thing about Christmas. Maybe it could be New Year's, around New Year's. So that's one modest comment, just in terms of missing one weekend there. But the other thing is 3 days before and 3 days after, that's plus the day. So we're really talking about a week for each one of these. And it seems a bit long to me personally. I could see if it was 1 or 2 days before or 1 or 2 days after, surely you're going to get good weather after 3 or 4 days, not after 6 or 7 days. So I would ask you to consider shortening that down a bit. Just somebody could, in effect, be setting off fireworks every day for 7 days times whatever number of weekends we're talking here. It's a lot of fireworks. So, and a lot of noise and a lot of disturbance, a lot of fire. There's danger associated with this in terms of potential fires. So that's why I support this. And I thought it was interesting in our last discussion about this that unfortunately, Councillor Douglas isn't here today, but she did indicate in her lake it's become a problem as well. It's certainly a problem out on my part of Georgian Bay. So I do support having something regulatory around this and would encourage that. So thank you very much.
CO Gunby, did you want to make a remark before I go to Councillor Wianko?
I sure did. I just want to clarify for Member Bocek and all other members that it's council's direction why staff bring forward bylaws and regulations for you to discuss and vote on. So if that clarifies it for anyone.
And Ms. King, do you want to respond to anything at this point?
Yeah, I can just speak to a couple things. I know Councillor Bocek said about Christian beliefs. I just looked at the bylaws that surrounded us, and that's what we did. I know I spoke to other bylaw officers who had someone brought that concern to them, and they said, if we looked at every holiday and every religion, that would be lovely, but it really wouldn't lessen the amount of fireworks because there are so many holidays. So that's just something I thought of there. And Labor Day is in there, so that's the 3 long weekends, right? So Victoria Day, Canada Day, Labor Day.
No, I think Councillor Cooper is referring to the civic holiday, August 1st, or.
Oh, okay, sorry. I didn't see that in other. It's hard to keep track of all the long weekends, but that can be something that's added if that's council's or committee's wishes. I didn't see that in either bylaws, so that's just what I followed with them.
Thank you. Councillor Wianko, followed by Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, I'm upset with Councillor Bocek. He took all my thunder because I think this council is getting way too deep into how people behave on their property. I mentioned yesterday with the Gypsy Moths. This is fireworks, and I'm against this policy. But I'll bring up some statistics here. I think both Councillor Bocek and Mayor Coutsier attended the 6 Mile Lake Cottage Association AGM, and there was 2 resolutions that were put on the floor by an individual, and I'll read them to you and I'll tell you how they voted on it. Well, first of all, we have an annual fireworks show. It's quite a big show. It's about a $15,000 show. And the resolution reads, I move that the 6 Mile Lake Cottage Association will cease the practice of an annual fireworks display. That resolution was defeated by 90.6% of our residents that voted. The second motion was, I move that the 6 Mile Lake will ban the use of fireworks by cottagers/residents of 6 Mile Lake. That was defeated by 92% of the voting residents. So there is a survey done on this topic now. We didn't talk about having special fireworks, but when you talk about 90% of the people do want to have some form of fireworks, I can't support this resolution. I think we need to get out of this idea of having all these rules and regulations affecting our enjoyment of our lake. I must admit, if the fireworks go off at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm pissed off, but it rarely happens. And if I hear fireworks going on at 10 o'clock, I'm the first guy on the patio watching it, no matter where it is. So, I think we're being controlled by a small minority. And the same thing is happening with the short-term rentals. It's a small minority that is driving these policies. And so I'm going with the large majority of the 90% of the people on 6 Mile that want them. So that's how I'm voting. And I do want to have a recorded vote.
Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Hazelton, please.
Yeah, I'm just going to hit on the point just brought forward by Councillors Wianko and Bocek. And it's great that I think everybody should be responsible and be allowed to do what they want to do on their own property within certain guidelines set up by our bylaws. But I think there becomes a time when what you do affects your neighbors. And now that we're having more people up in cottage country more often, and the more of them, it's going to have a greater effect. I am very much in favor of a bylaw of some type regarding fireworks. I don't see why exceptions can't be made if they're applied for in regards to maybe the 6 Mile Lake display. But I think we should have something in place that people can work with. Because I know of a property up in our area on the islands, fireworks go off pretty much every weekend. And I know it's annoying for close neighbors. My wife loves it. She loves to see other people burning their money with fireworks, which is basically what it looks like to me anyway. But I think we should have a bylaw in place. I would like to make a helpful recommendation to Ms. King, and that is that we include this under the general guidelines that no fireworks should be set off if the fire rating is high or above, just as a general rule. Thank you.
Ms. King.
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. So in our burning bylaw, we already have set out that it can't be higher extreme for fireworks, and we have our set fines all done in our burning bylaw. So we kind of kept that separate just in case everyone's looking for the, what the fire danger ratings allowed. We wanted to make sure it's there. It is referenced in the bylaw to point them there to make sure they check that as well. And I just wanted to clarify too, the display fireworks. So for 6 Mile Lake, they can do that when it doesn't have to be on a holiday. They can do that display because it's a display firework. So as long as they get the permit, which they do through the chief fire official, then they can do that whenever they like, as long as they get the permit and apply through the process.
Can I just respond really quickly that with regards to the fire rating, I think having it in both documents wouldn't hurt, Karina, because people tend to be very focused on what they're dealing with at the time, and they probably aren't likely to look at the burning bylaw when they're dealing with fireworks or vice versa. That's all.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Karina, for bringing this forward. There's a lot of people who have brought forward concerns about endless fireworks. We've heard a little bit about that today. I've heard Councillor Wianko say that the people on his lake are not in favor of a ban. I would agree that not too many people are in a total ban. And I've heard him say that 90% are in favor of their fireworks event, but that really doesn't relate to what we're, I think, trying to deal with here. And what we're trying to deal with here, as I understand it, is the nuisance fireworks put on by, and you've kind of heard it from a couple other councillors, people come up and just light off fireworks whenever they can, whenever they feel they want to. And there are a lot of people who have complained that this is impacting their dogs and impacting other characteristics of their life. So do I think we need it? Absolutely. To your points in 4.1, I think it would be very easy to take Christmas Day out of there and put in civic holiday. That way you're getting away from religious days. And I don't really know anybody that fires off fireworks on Christmas Day anyways. But then again, maybe I'm just missing something, but certainly nobody in our community, as I understand it, has ever really focused on that. So that might be a simple fix there. But I want to pick up on what Councillor Cooper brought forward, and that is, and although I understand what you're trying to get at here, 3 days preceding, 3 days following, but that's 7 days. And it's almost like, as let's say somebody on lot number 1 wants to set off fireworks on civic holiday. I don't know if there's a way of doing this, but perhaps there is a way of saying you have one of those days that you can set off fireworks. You cannot set off fireworks on the 3 days prior and the 3 days after, but you have a 7-day window for that civic holiday weekend in which you can pick, assuming fire ratings and weather, etc., that you can pick to set off fireworks. But you can only use 1 day of that 7-day window. Anyways, I know I'm trying to solve a problem on the fly, and I'm not really wanting to do that. That's your job. But absolutely agree that we need to do something. We've had so many complaints come in where people have, as I've already said, complaining about their pets and their dogs and those reactions and some ability to have some quiet. And so it's not happening every single weekend. So I absolutely agree and will support that we do something like this. I would just ask if we could find a way of bringing some perhaps additional common sense to your 3 days before and 3 days after structure, so that the residents won't be looking at it as, oh my God, we've got, Victoria, Canada, Labor, Civic, and New Year's, five events. So we have 5 times 7 days in which I can set off fireworks. Woohoo, party time. That's what I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Before we do a second round, I'd like to make a few comments myself. Firstly, in response to Councillor Wianko and Councillor Bocek about we're putting too many rules in place. Well, I mean, unfortunately, that's part of what council does, because we're having more and more people living closer and closer together, and not everybody's shares the same tastes or are great neighbors as everybody else. I mean, half of what we do is planning, and guess what? Planning is telling you what you can and can't do in your own property. So I don't think we can just rule out a bylaw simply because it's telling people there's something they can't do, because we've been doing that. This township's been doing that for 50 years, in effect. I wish there were fewer rules. Trust me. Anybody who's building on their property wishes there were fewer rules. But we're not. Unfortunately, all our rules are trying to tell everybody to be good neighbors, and it seems a fair number of us need our hands held on how to be a good neighbor. One thing that I'm a little bit disappointed in both the prior conversation and this conversation is nobody's made any reference to our natural environment. And I think that, sure, fireworks upsets pets, and having once had a dog who got very upset every time fireworks went off, I can appreciate that. But what about all the animals? To what degree are they being disturbed by the fireworks? Are they being disturbed by all the bright lights? How many birds get thrown off track by people burning bright lights at night? And I don't know what the answer is. How much, debris is fireworks throwing into the water or the forests? From stuff does fall down from them, and it doesn't all burn up in the sky, let alone whatever pollution we may be causing by fireworks. So I think we have to take that into account. I'm also quite conscious of the fact that when people come to our township or live in our township, many people have different ideas of why they're there. I mean, some people live in our township. Some people earn a living in our township. Some people come and partying is their number one, I'm getting out of the city, I'm going wild. And, and what happens in Cognisheen stays in Cognisheen, or some such similar expression. And I just picked on Cognisheen, but I can pick on any area. But other people come because they want to get back to nature in one form or another. Think of how many people who enjoy going skinny dipping at night and think that's one of the great joys of a cottage. Well, they don't want to do that with bright lights shining on them from the neighbors, or under the light of a bunch of fireworks. I mean, and I think we got to try to come up with some balance the other comment I'm going to add is I've received over the last couple of years numerous complaints. When I say numerous, I'm not talking hundreds. Let's be fair here. I'm talking in the tens as opposed to the hundreds. But lots of complaints about fireworks, and I would say 3/4 of them, I'm guessing, the complaints are about short-term rental cottages. And it seems like every weekend somebody new comes up, they've rented the cottage for the weekend, and it's party headquarters. And what's a party without fireworks, it seems? And I'm showing my age, but I can remember the only time we ever saw fireworks when I was growing up was Victoria Day. Full stop. And there was arguments about whether they could be Sunday night versus Monday night sometimes on Victoria Day. And I find well, I appreciate all that I've heard so far. My perspective on all this, I would like to see a fireworks restriction simply so that we can have some weekends where we don't have fireworks, just like we know other weekends we will. And I think that trying to be fair to everybody. I'd be all in favor of, if we some point down the road are contemplating short-term rental rules, if we somehow said that short-term rental people can't set off fireworks or something like that. I tell you, that would take care of 3/4 of the complaints I've heard about fireworks. I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but anyway, just some of my thoughts. I think this is worth discussing. I can appreciate that this may or may not eventually come up with a useful bylaw. I don't know, but I just want to, I think we should try to find some sort of middle ground where everybody can get some of what they want when they're in our township. And let's start another round. And I have in the order I think I saw them were Councillors Bochek, Cooper, and Wianko, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've been on council for 7+ years, and I've had two not complaints, 2 emails or calls with concerns over fireworks. We have over 25,000 people in this township in the summer. There's 365 days of the year. Quick math on that is 9 million opportunities for people to complain. Karina, can you tell me how many formal complaints came into this township and registered a complaint against fireworks in the last, I don't care, year, 5 years, give it what you want. But out of the 9 million possibilities of people complaining, how many did we get in the last year complaining about fireworks?
To Brian, or Mr. Bochek, I don't have those numbers offhand. It's a bit different to track because we have currently, like I said, in our burning bylaw, we have that high and extreme. So when we've had lots of calls, I knew even with the fire department personnel have gone out for those calls. So that's more what we would be tracking. I know I've spoke to people personally who were concerned for their dog or wildlife, etc. But I wouldn't have those numbers quickly off the top of my head because they're kind of one-offs that aren't specifically assigned. Like they would be more of an inquiry at that time because we don't have a bylaw that actually speaks to, as long as it's not higher extreme, then they wouldn't be breaking anything, if that makes sense.
But as you see my point, and you probably know off the top of your head how many complaints the fire department or bylaw got about fireworks over the course of a year. And I can honestly say probably a handful. And that's it. And I don't think it's a big concern. It's a big concern to some people. I mean, I have dogs. I have neighbors with dogs. Fireworks go off around here all the time. We sit and watch them and enjoy them. I don't see the reason for this at all. And let the chips fall where they may. If it becomes a bylaw, 21 Hillside Drive, September the 10th, come write me a ticket because my son's getting married and I'll be lighting off fireworks. It's just, we need to stop. Sometime we need to stop, sit and think and figure out if what we're doing is the will of the people or the will of this council. I don't get it. So I'll vote with council and I'll go with the way council votes, but I'm certainly not supporting this at all. And nor do my constituents. I talk to them constantly about this.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Councillor. And so just as sort of a follow-up, we don't have a bylaw in place, so we wouldn't be really tracking anything presently other than complaints, fire risk complaints. So I just wanted to point that out. But I also, wanted to respond to the concern, particularly for 6 Mile Lake. The questions that were asked, however, were very specific, and that is, would you support a ban on fireworks? Would you support getting rid of the 6 Mile Lake fireworks display? We heard that you can get a a permit under these current suggested bylaws. That's a point. And furthermore, I think we're talking about apples and oranges here, because essentially the question that was asked was a full ban. This isn't a full ban by any means. It's accommodating people who do want to set off fireworks more than just on Victoria Day, which I, like Mayor Couture, remember as being the only time we saw them many, many years ago. And I understand the world changes, but to the point that fireworks can destroy the peace and quiet for everybody, I find that very invasive. And I thought a lot of the comments, very well thought out comments of our mayor were bang on, and I fully support something along these lines. Worst case scenario, I might suggest that if it has to be, maybe one of the things, if our councillors feel so strongly about this, maybe wards 3 and 1 would like to have theirs excluded from this, if that's a possibility. I would point out, however, that Councillor Douglas, when we last spoke about this, who's in Ward 1, was in support of something like this. So anyway, long story short, I think we need to do something and make Georgian Bay enjoyable for everybody, not just people that want to go wacko on the weekends. Thank you.
Councillor Wianko.
Well, I've been around long enough to, and I've passed enough bylaws and so on over my career. What I don't like to do is pass bylaws that are unenforceable and make criminals of just about anybody. And you're not going to stop the fireworks, and you're not going to come out at nighttime to catch them doing it. So it's unenforceable, and it makes criminals of the people who shoot off fireworks on the weekend. And I can't support that. So, you know, if all the councillors from Georgian Bay want it, then let it apply to Georgian Bay coastline and not the inland lakes. That's maybe a path forward. The other way of looking at it, or another option, is maybe to do a survey of all the cottage associations on the coast and in the inlands to find out what their opinions are on this. Maybe if we get enough organizations saying, yeah, we need a bylaw, fine. Then I'll have a better handle on what the general population feels. But I think imposing regulations that are unenforceable and makes criminals out of you and I, then I can't support it. Sorry.
Councillors Jarvis or Hazelton, do you want to weigh in on this second round? Councillor Hazelton.
I would like to be a criminal. Just kidding. So I want to pick up on a thread that I think our mayor was starting down. We have laws and we enact laws to try to frame common sense. We all get in our cars and we have speed limits to control ourselves, because if we didn't, we'd have crazy people doing crazy things, and there would be no ability to enforce it. And I could go on and on and on. Can we enforce this fireworks idea of constraint? I'm not quite sure how we do it. But the fact that if there is a bylaw in place, it will have a more positive impact in influencing people that are on the edge of whether or not they should or shouldn't do it, to say, oh, well, it's not allowed, so maybe I won't. So I think having the bylaws in place help to foster a deeper sense of common sense. We talked a little bit about statistics, and I know putting Karina on the spot is a challenge to come up with the statistics, but let's be realistic. When you don't have a constraint, people stop complaining. We've heard about this from the noise bylaw perspective. If I have a problem with noise, and I know and I learn that somebody can make noise as much as they want, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., I stop complaining. That doesn't mean the complaints go away. It just means that we stop hearing them. And so I would suggest, I can guarantee you in my ward, there are tons of people who have problems with the endless fireworks. And they are seeking ways in which they can provide some constraint on this. And this is not me saying this, thinking this or whatever. I have facts of complaints that have been brought to my attention, specifically about fireworks, specifically about the impact of fireworks on the dogs and other things. So this is not a phantom problem. This is a real problem. And one of the things that we keep talking about is how do we help our community enjoy the natural state, enjoy the community in which they have these cottages and properties and perhaps year-round residents. And if we don't help foster common sense, then it's going to come back and bite us later. So absolutely support providing a bylaw like this that helps to foster and set expectations of what common sense really is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
It was mentioned yesterday and I mentioned it again, just reinforce comments just made. Common sense is a difficult item for you to quantify. And sometimes you have to legislate to get it into place. I'm all in favor of the bylaw. I'm all in favor of trying to prevent people from being a real nuisance to our community. And this is one way to do it. Enough said.
Okay, we've had 2 rounds here. We know that a couple of councillors are clearly against this bylaw, and I can understand some of the reasoning, and we know some councillors are quite a bit in favor of it. And I find myself leaning in the direction of having something. I do believe that and I'm talking personally, from my experience in my corner of the township, fireworks are happening. I'm disappointed. We have a nice peaceful evening. You hear the loons calling, and all of a sudden, dang it, there at 10:30 fireworks are going off. And it just seems to break the evening. And I like the idea of restricting fireworks to special occasions. And I think, one of those special occasions could be September 10th this coming year, because the celebration is taking place. And maybe we'll park on either side of the street from a distance. We don't get the invitation in the mail and just watch the fireworks from a distance. We might do that. I don't know. But I do think it makes sense to have some restriction on this. And I'm thinking about the natural peace and quiet that you can get in the evening. Just like I like the night sky lighting bylaw, because I don't want the whole sky lit up by excessive lights on various properties. And yes, it's restricting property rights in one sense, but on the other hand, we have to talk about a certain level of responsibility. It shouldn't all be about rights. It should also be about responsibility to our neighbors and being a good neighbor. So I think this bylaw could use a little bit of an improvement. I think the idea of week-long windows is too long. I think the 3 days on either side is too much. I think that we should remove Christmas from the list. I don't think we should have religious holidays. But I also recognize that if somebody wants to have a fireworks display on a particular date because in their family or their religion or their culture, that is a very important date. I think that they can apply for a permit or maybe even ask us to make that one of the dates in the bylaw going forward. But I do think it makes sense. I mean, I know there's some places in the world that they only have one day in the year. And I can tell you, if you go to some place, if you go in Germany on New Year's Eve, you're going to go nuts because everybody's laying off fireworks because that's the one day they're allowed to do fireworks, because 364 days of the year, they're not allowed to do them. Full stop. So I think having a bylaw of some sort is quite reasonable. I think this bylaw that it has been drafted is a very good bylaw. I think there should be a little bit of fine tuning. So that's where I stand, and I know that Councillor Bocek wants to respond, and I will allow a little bit more. We'll allow Ms. King to go first.
Just like to clarify just a couple of things if we're going to go back. So we don't like the 3 days before and 3 days after. Is that what I'm gathering? Yes. I took that because other municipalities, some of them had 5 days before and 5 days after, but we can change that. And I was just wondering, maybe 3 days or 2 days before and 1 day after, would that be a smaller window, but still allow for the Friday or Saturday night? If it's the holiday long weekend Monday, then that would shorten that window down. Is that something that we would like to see?
Well, I think if I may suggest, we're talking, for instance, long weekends. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It's a 4-day total window, as opposed to, you know, you're giving us a 7-day window. Maybe it should be a 4-day window that is restricted to the weekend. And Councillor Hazen, are you going to suggest any individual can only use one of those 4 days?
Well, no, I was going to say that won't necessarily work for the July 1st holiday because it's never on a guaranteed weekend. So
True.
I like what you're getting at. I just wanted to point that out.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's, and some celebrations like Hazelton just said there, they happen on like a Tuesday, depending on Canada Day, right? And those situations.
Okay.
So that's where I thought if it was the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then the Monday, the holiday, Tuesday, that's still, we still have lessened it quite a bit from it's a free for all right now versus that. So if we did 3 days before and 1 day after, or 2 days before and 1 day after, just want to make sure I know where everyone is, and then we can make those changes if that's what the committee wishes.
Just say, I think 2 days before, 1 day after is fine. Something along those lines, I would suggest it would work for, I think, most people. That's still a pretty big window. To say you can do it just on the 1 day, hard to pull off, but hopefully people will be respectful enough if they're going to have a fireworks display that it's on Saturday night, but not Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bocek, did I get the wrong date for your wedding?
Oh, I've been married 37 years.
Okay,
You don't have to worry
your
about me.
son.
Yeah, the 10th. There's just so many flaws in this. It isn't funny, and it's not because of the way the bylaw was written. You did a great job, Ms. King. But I sit in my kitchen here right now looking at 3 different townships out one window. I've got Tay to my right, I've got Severn to the center, I've got Georgian Bay Township here. On Little Lake, Gloucester Pool, Big Chute, Severn Marina, or the Severn River. Like if you go up to the Severn River, we have Severn Township, Georgian Bay Township, and Muskoka Lakes. They all fire their fireworks out over the river, or they put them on the barge out of Wayne's Place. They go out in the middle of the river and they fire off the fireworks whenever they want. There is no bylaws in other townships around us stating when they can and cannot light off fireworks. So if you're on the Severn River, there's fireworks going off from all directions, but it's 3 different townships. The same with here in Port Severn. Half of Little Lake and half of Gloucester Pool is in Severn Township. So you've taken one side of the lake and said, nope, you're a criminal. You can't light off fireworks. It's illegal. On the other side of the lake, you can light them off 365 days of the year. I see this being flawed. I see it to be a good concept, but the logistics of enforcement are impossible. They're not there. You might as well not have a bylaw if you can't enforce it, because what bylaws do is they create costs and expense. And the next thing you know, we're hiring another bylaw officer, another 2 bylaw officers. We have administration charges. We have court charges. We got to go to Bracebridge to defend ourselves and hire lawyers and everything else. There's a lot of consequences when this council puts a bylaw into place. For the reasons I just stated, I'm not going to vote in favor of this bylaw. I can't be sitting on Little Lake and my next door neighbor's lighting off fireworks legally, and I'm 2 doors down and I can't light them off because I live in the wrong township. So this is just too flawed for me, and I won't support it. But I didn't get a response from Karen. Karen, I would like a recorded vote on this. Thank you.
I only come back to that. Councillor Bochek, does that mean that our planning laws should be the same on our side of Little Lake as they are on the Severn side?
We're just talking about fireworks here. We're talking about a little bit of light and noise to celebrate something. We're not talking about building bylaws or zoning bylaws. It's firecrackers, sparklers, sprinkler, whatever you call them. My kids will be out there with their little sparklers, waving them around in the air whenever they want. And fireworks whenever we want. It's just not an enforceable law. Shouldn't be making bylaws that aren't enforceable.
Councillor Wianko, followed by Councillor Jarvis, please.
I would like to make an amendment to the resolution and have at the very end that the bylaw only applies to, and it could be, you could have awards 2 and 4, or you're going to have the Georgian Bay Coastal Community. But I'd like to have that amendment made to the resolution. And I think, Brian, at that point, you might be able to support it if it doesn't affect awards 1 and 3. So you might get some unanimous support on that. And maybe Brian can second my friendly amendment.
Yeah, I'll second the amendment, but I truly believe that everybody in this township we represent, not just our wards. I have tons of family and friends that live in Honey Harbor. That they won't agree with this. So yeah, I'll certainly second the amendment if that's needed, but I'm not going to support the resolution regardless.
Councillor Jarvis.
I was going to suggest that should we enact a bylaw like this, that we make sure we share it with surrounding communities, and perhaps we'll see similar bylaws come out for Tiny and other areas as well.
Ms. King.
I can speak to that. Muskoka Lakes and Tay do have bylaws as well as Huntsville. I did look at those while I was doing it. I would suggest against dividing up the township. I feel like this is one of those bylaws, because then if you have a neighbor on the fence, then they're like Brian's saying, they're allowed in the township and they're not allowed. It just makes it a bit more confusing. I would suggest against that, but that's just from me.
Councillor Cooper.
You know, I really would like to make sure that I look after my backyard, but I'd like to look really after our whole township. And I think it makes full sense to use the entire township. And I'm very interested to hear, which maybe I missed before, that a good number of our neighboring townships have bylaws in place as well. Maybe they want to enjoy the peace and quiet. So I would just like to point that out. And as far as being a criminal, this is a bylaw infraction. This isn't criminal. It's somebody going to jail. My goodness, I don't know what we're talking about here. This is, I don't know. It's one hell of a jail. We're gonna have to build one. Thank you.
Chief Van Dam, did you want to join the conversation?
Thank you, Your Worship. Obviously, we've had a little, I'm going to say, healthy conversation with this bylaw. One of the things that we will need to address to go forward will be the delegation of authority. With it is who's going to be the person who approves, I'm going to say, requests for bylaws, whether you want it to be the bylaw officers can do it. Do you want it to come to council for approvals, or the chief fire official with the other approvals? So that going forward, we will need to make sure that that's addressed in the bylaw report as well.
Mayor, could I suggest that I think we should let our staff do their job, and I think what many of us have said here is that, you know, it would be nice that this could be enforced. It's probably not going to be that easy, but it's going to set a tone. It's going to set direction for our community, and our council is suggesting to them that they try and control themselves in terms of when they have fireworks or not. And so I think it should be A, across the township, and B, our staff can take on the responsibility of enforcing it. Although I think, as I said, I think the intent we're trying to put forth here is the main point. Thank you.
Okay. Clerk Way, the resolution that I have in front of me is, be it resolved that Committee of the Whole recommends the council approve the proposed fireworks bylaw, but I think we may want to put in a comment or two about amendments. I don't know if you've made it the notes necessary.
I do have a few points. I have a few question marks, so perhaps I can share my screen for a couple of moments.
Sure.
And then that can be a starting point, and I think provide clarification for myself for wording and some clarification perhaps for Ms. King as well. Everyone see the screen okay?
Yeah, be it resolved that Committee of the Whole recommends the council approve the proposed fireworks bylaw be amended. The reduction of days surrounding approved holiday dates, include the civic holiday in August as an approved holiday, remove Christmas as an approved holiday, and then you have Ward 1 and 3 exempt, and staff have authority to approve exemptions. All right. I think we've discussed a fair bit the days around approved holiday dates, and I'm not sure where we landed. Ms. King, was it 2 days on either side or 2 before and 1 after? I've forgotten I think that was the final version.
I have written down 2 before and 1 after.
Okay.
And then it would just be, someone said take Christmas out and someone said leave it in. And then we'll definitely add civic because that's something I missed. So that would just be the Christmas is the only one I need clarification on, I think, right, Karen?
Councillor Hazelton.
I don't know about you, but I think there's enough changes in this that staff, rather than putting them on the spot, could be asked to consider all of these things and bring it back to another committee of the whole. I don't think there's any sense of urgency given the time of year we're at. Perhaps staff could also be directed to liaise with Councillor Douglas, because as Councillor Cooper pointed out, Councillor Douglas felt that this was a serious issue on Go Home Lake. And rather than excluding Go Home Lake with wards 1 and 3, you might find that Councillor Douglas wants Go Home Lake included. So these are all unknowns, and I can't speak for her. But unless there's a sense of urgency, we need to get this back to council next month. Why don't we leave it with staff for 1 more month and come back to the next committee of the whole?
I'm sure Ms. King would love the entertainment over the holidays.
I'm happy to speak with Councillor Douglas as well, just to get her input. I really think we need it to be the whole township or not. I don't suggest putting it to ward. I don't think that's a good idea. The Christmas thing, if you can clarify that, then I'm good to go back to the drawing board and bring it back again.
I don't know about contacting a councillor outside of a council meeting to get, nobody contacted me last month about anything that I missed in the last meeting about my opinion on it. And if it was an important thing, then, well, I won't comment on that, but we're in the council, we're in the COW meeting now, we're discussing it, and the councillors here that are discussing it can vote on it. My comment is agreeing with Karina. If you're going to vote on this thing, take the exclusion of 3 and 4 out of it. It's got to be a township-wide thing. Can't exclude wards. It's just a band-aid trying to fix something that shouldn't be needing to be fixed. So no, and if Councillor Douglas wants input in this, she'll have it at the council meeting. She can she can vote at the council meeting, whether she agrees with this or not.
All right, CO Gunby followed by Clerk Way.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that member Bocek is correct in the fact that council's role is not to liaise with staff in the creation of policies or bylaws. Staff take their direction from these meetings and the outset of them. So Councillor Douglas will see the draft agenda, or sorry, the agenda when it's published a few days before the next meeting. And that's when she will see that.
Clerk Way.
Isn't that 5 days before the next meeting?
It'll be 7 days in January. Yes. Yes. Good catch. I was just going to also suggest another option is that another draft comes back to committee of the whole instead of another draft coming back to council. If there's still much more discussion and debate to be had, then perhaps this is better to come back to COW. That's also an option.
Councillor Jarvis seems to think that's a reasonable idea. A couple others are, I think that's sort of what Councillor Hazelton was implying as well.
Mayor Coetzee, if I could just jump in here, I'd be
Please.
delighted to have it come back to COW, as long as we don't spend 3 hours on it again, whatever. We've talked
Well,
about it a whole
yeah.
lot, and I think if we have a draft that's pretty concise and deals with more or less what we discussed today, I hope we can keep it to a reasonable, down to a dull roar. Thank you.
Well, we did about an hour on the luminaires and now about an hour on fireworks, and I think that's about that's a reasonable limit in my opinion. Councillor Jarvis?
Yeah, just to, we talked about a couple of things here. I agree it should be a municipal-wide bylaw, not specific to certain wards. And Sigrid, I'm going to keep Christmas in there.
You want to keep Christmas in? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I know. I'll be up on the island at Christmas. It's lighting off fireworks all over the place. At least there's snow on the ground, so we don't have a fire hazard. But yeah, keep it in.
It doesn't matter to me, Mr. Mayor, if it comes back to the committee of the whole. I've already stated my position on it. If it comes back, I'll be voting against it anyways. So I don't see the reason for it coming back. We've all stated our cases here. We know 2 councillors don't want it, 4 councillors do want it. If you vote on it, it's going to council. To come back, this has been back to COW, Paul Wianko, Peter Cooper. How many times have we had this discussion on fireworks at COW over the last 7-8 years? Ridiculous amount. And even before that,
So I'll call the vote. I'm going to call the vote, and I've heard at least 3 times that somebody wants it recorded. So the resolution, which has now just disappeared.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. And I'm going to say, moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole recommends that a draft fireworks bylaw be brought back for consideration with the following amendments. Reduction of days surrounding approved holiday dates, 2 days before and 1 day after. Include the civic holiday in August as an approved holiday, and staff have authority to approve exemptions. Ms. Way, can you take the vote, please?
Absolutely. Let the record show that Councillor Bocek requested a recorded vote. Councillor Bocek, how do you vote?
Nay.
Councillor Cooper, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Douglas is absent. Councillor Hazelton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Jarvis, how do you vote?
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Wianko, how do you vote?
No.
Mayor Coetzee, how do you vote?
4.
Let the record show that the motion carries 4-2.
All right, we'll get another opportunity to talk about this. Now, the final item, I believe, was a waste management update from Councillor Wianko.
Well, now that you put me in a good mood, maybe I'll have a rant. I'm
Well-
quite concerned.
Rant away.
I'm quite
within limits.
concerned. I'm quite concerned about the slow pace of our review of waste management within our township. And I don't want to speculate on the reasons, But I've been on the Engineering and Public Works Committee now for 3 years. In the last year or so, we've been trying to move actively on waste management upgrades to a number of the municipalities. And the main objective, of course, is some of the bin sites. And we haven't really moved that far when it comes to the bin sites in our township. And I'm quite concerned that the district is moving forward with or without us. They're going to move forward. They've already announced that there's going to be a supervisor at the bin site in Honey Harbor this year. Maybe councilors don't know that, but that's what's going to happen. And they also went ahead and suggested that they eliminate the use or the need for large objects pickup in Georgian Bay. And so they're moving forward with or without us. And I'm concerned that we're falling behind on our assessment. And I wouldn't mind having a resolution prepared today saying that we'll tackle this topic either at COW every month, or have a monthly meeting at least to move this waste management issue forward. Because I would like to get it done in this term of council. It shouldn't have to go in the next term of council. But the district is adamant, come April 2023, all bins will be removed. And they haven't changed that stance. And we haven't convinced them to not change. So let's get moving now. We've made some progress on the inland part of the assessment, but it's really coming down to the Honey Harbor area where we have 9 and the 6, I believe the 6 bin sites on the inland community, or not necessarily on the inland community, but there is another 6 sites. So there's about 15 sites that we have to resolve. And I don't think we made any move towards that. So I think we need some good, strong leadership, and maybe have this topic added to every COW, or at least to have a special meeting, at least on a monthly basis, to get this issue resolved this year.
Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Bocek.
So I'd like to thank Councillor Wianko for the waving a bit of a red flag. It is a huge issue. And I would very much like to see this addressed. I don't think the district has been listening very well at all, rather poorly. So when we talk about this, if we do it at Cal, for example, I think it would be really useful to remember that we should have all options on the table, including outsourcing the service ourselves. So I'm in fact fairly far down that road anyway, at least as it pertains towards 2 and 4. But I think we've got a real problem with a group that don't really understand the water access world. And frankly, I heard the mayor during the last discussion over at the district regarding this at your committee meeting, Councillor Wianko, saying that the township of Muskoka Lakes has almost as many water access properties as Georgian Bay, which is complete nonsense. So it just shows you the lack of understanding of what we're facing. So, and I frankly find the same thing with the district staff, the commissioner and director around this subject, not getting it. It's quite clear from the discussion. So I'd be happy to have that discussion, but I think all options have to be on the table. Thank you.
Theo Gunby.
Thank you. I just wanted to advise the committee that when the final core services review report comes next month, they will be referencing this and some options that we have.
Councillor Bocek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Paul, for putting this on the agenda for today. I just want to read an email, a short little email that I got from a resident in the Honey Harbor area. It says, just wanted to know if there's been any info, thoughts, response, or feedback that you can pass on to us regarding our letter to council a few months ago, other than your own. And basically, I just sent back to them. My understanding is the district has thrown the solid waste issue back at our feet. We are hoping that barge pickup can continue, but a report will be given to us with more information. Please allow time for things to filter through, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. So he wrote a letter to the mayor and council from Pleasant Island, representing the people on Pleasant Island. I guess I'm the only one that responded to him so far, according to him. I don't know. This is an issue that our residents are very, very, very upset about. Anybody wants to see the emails I got, I can send them to you. I got about 30 of them. To the point where people are going to start taking their garbage to the marinas in Midland or Penetang, because they're going to move their boats over there and start traveling to their cottages from Y Heritage and from some of the marinas over in the Penetang area, because they don't have a garbage issue there. That's how important the solid waste issue is to our island residents out on Georgian Bay, that they're willing to move where they moor their boats and take business away from our marinas that support our cottage industry. That's how pissed off they are. And it's gotten me fired up too. I don't have an issue in my ward. I think I have 2 or 3 bins down here. People have come to the realization that they're going to have to drive up to the Baxter ward, which is about 2 minutes from any house here. Not an issue. Where the issue is on the island properties and the water access properties. This needs to be dealt with, and we need to stand up for our residents as a council, as a whole, because we shouldn't be tolerating this from the district. There's no way. You don't take something that's been working for 20 years and just cancel it. You modify it, you change it, you come up with new ideas, but you don't do what they're doing. So I'm fully in support of getting involved with any committees or anything you want me to get involved with, but this has to be a passion of this council for this township. Thank you.
Councillor Wianko, did you want to make another comment?
Well, I was going to say earlier, and I guess I have to say it now. I think we also got to stop this animosity between ourselves and the district. In my involvement with the district on this topic, they want to do everything they can to help us. Just tell us what they want. I know you've been after some costs. This is not a cost issue. Let's face it, this is not a cost issue. This is a convenience issue. So let's get down to the minimum requirements and don't worry about the cost, because I'm sure everybody wants to take their waste to the marinas. But the district has the resources, they have the consultants. Let's use them as much as we can. But let's stop this animosity between the district and ourselves, because it's not helping. And I don't think we can do this ourselves. To go on our own, I don't think the district can allow us. I think if we wanted to go on our own, that would be a decision of district council, and they're going to have to absorb more costs if we're not paying the base cost for a lot of this stuff. Like, who's going to pay for our transfer sites, or who's going to pay our portion towards the Rosewood disposal area, and who's going to take our garbage? But anyway, that's another issue we can talk about it. But this animosity between ourselves and district has got to stop, because they have they really want to help us. They really do. And so let's use them.
If I may be allowed to comment on this, I'm afraid, and I'm trying not to get all wound up, but I'm afraid that I disagree, Councillor Wianko, in the sense that if district really wants to help us, they'd be at the table. And they've punted the ball. They've punted the ball forward yet another year. Asking for extensions because they don't. I mean, their consultants don't have a clue. Their consultants believe that Councillor Cooper can take his garbage to a transfer station in 5 minutes. That's what it was on their report, 5 minutes. They don't have a flippin' clue, the consultants I'm referring to. I think some of the people at district are starting to clue in. I think Miss Mack has understood that if they actually emptied full bins at marinas, there'll be less of a mess. She gets that. It's taken us decades to get them that far. No, I don't think that they're our enemy. You're absolutely right. I don't think we should be attacking them, but I also don't think they've come to the table. They're supposed to have responsibility for collecting our garbage. Yes, it's more challenging when you have water access only residences, of which over half our properties in this township are. And oh, and by the way, unlike a few islands on the Muskoka Lakes, it's more than a 5-minute boat ride to get from your island to the shore where a bin might be. It's a different situation. And I'm very frustrated about this whole thing because every time we try to get something moving, we run into roadblocks. I mean, at one point, district was saying that maybe having a barging service would make sense. And now they're saying they don't want to consider any barges at all. We're getting inconsistent messaging from them as to what the solution is. I mean, I explained to Commissioner Yan a few weeks ago, the same day that the EPW meeting was, that, if you had a transfer station that was water access, that would be a good step in the right direction. And it was almost like he was surprised by the suggestion. And I'm going, I'm sure this was a comment from day one. I'm sure we made reference to the archipelago that have water access transfer stations. I know we brought it up repeatedly. And so I can't blame, I refuse to feel overly guilty about being frustrated. And this is a service that we're paying for in the district, as we learned the hard way a few years ago, have been provided 20 years against the law. They were providing a service. We had no idea that this was not according to the rules and regs of the province. Well, I believe that the province's rules and regulations had no appreciation of what a water access property is. They didn't even know they existed. That's part of our challenge. But I agree with you, by the way, that we should now, having monthly meetings of this council, or having it on the monthly, every month that we talk about it, I think is absolutely necessary, actually, sadly. Because yes, this district, depending upon what day you talk to them, they're either expecting us to give them the answer, or admitting they don't know what to do. And I'm thinking that, and yet when you look at the budget that's coming to district that we're supposed to be approving over the next couple of months, but they're charging us far more than any other municipality in the district on a per assessment basis. Our bill is that much higher. We're 10% of the population and we're paying 15 or 16% of the solid waste bill. It's just, anyway, enough said. There's huge frustration, and I wish I knew, if I knew the way out right now, I'd be sharing it with you, trust me. Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you, Mayor Councillor. I wanted to first of all say weekly meetings or monthly meetings or whatever talks about this, absolutely 100%. Those of you who read the last blurb from the district, and I can't remember whether it was Councillor Wianko or Mayor Councillor who shared it, when you read what was written about canceling all the barge service, it's pretty obvious that it is the district doesn't want to do it at any cost. So are they service focused? Absolutely not. They don't have a clue about how to deliver service. We have Councillor Bocek here who's been squawking about, and this is not a negative comment, but squawking about Present Island and the residents out there. And basically what we're saying is the district at no possible charge that they could imagine would ever want to provide that service again. In other words, the district is deciding what they choose to make available. that's a scary topic, and I could continue down that path, but I won't. What I will say though is all you have to do is look around at all the other municipalities in Ontario that have marinas. There isn't one municipality that is being forced to comply with these so-called MECP regulations. So this is, again, dreamt up by the district. In fact, if you read that last memo that I just referred to, you will see that Fred Yon is trying to once again threaten our township by saying if we don't comply by not having barge services, he's going to go and force MECP to come along and cancel them for us, just like he has the bin sites. So I ask you, who is our friend? And when will we finally step up and say, enough is enough? We have residents who need services. We are the township. Let's find a way to solve the problem, because I can guarantee you from what I've heard, there is no way the district will ever come up with a solution that will satisfy our residents. And that's my little soapbox for the day. Thank you. Bye.
Councillor Wojcik.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page here. I guess what got my shorts in a knot, I got a call from Dave Radzinski, who's the president of Maple Leaf Marina. He has South Bay Cove, which is one of our well-known marinas here, and he also has another marina. He has purchased and installed all private bins at South Bay Cove. I think there's 10 of them lined up there now. That's coming out of his pocket. He pays taxes. He pays a fortune in taxes. And he has to provide his clientele with disposal of their garbage. He's beside himself. I'm beside him, beside myself, thinking this is a huge expense that this man has taken because of the incompetence of district to be able to provide a service. And we're going to be seeing this more and more and more. I'm beside myself. I wish I could do something about it. Alone, I can't, but I think together we can. I really think we all need to be, and we don't see it eye on too much on this council, but this one, I think we see eye to eye on 100%.
And what's interesting is when you make reference to South Bay Cove, he's not breaking the law.
No.
Because he's serving yachts.
Yeah.
But if the marina next door, Georgian Bay Landing, that's just around the next bay, that serves cottagers, if he sets up private services there, then he's breaking the law, because according to the province, garbage is being brought from one property to a second property without a license, whereas a yacht isn't considered a separate property. So even though that garbage could be produced 5 feet off of Councillor Cooper's dock, the yacht can bring it into South Bay Cove, and Councillor Cooper can't bring it into Georgian Bay Landing. That's the stupidity of the Ontario law.
If I could just suggest, then all we need is one yacht at every marina and we'd be all set.
You know, but I asked the province that, and they still said no, because only the yacht would be allowed to unload its garbage at that marina into a private bin.
That's not true. If you go to Heinsohn's or any of the marinas over in Midland and Penetang, where I went out for about 5 years because I couldn't find a slip in Honey Harbor, I took my garbage back to those marinas.
But you were breaking the law.
Well,
nobody enforced it, but you were.
Simcoe County said, we don't even get into it. That's, by the way, where Stephanie Mack came from. She said, we don't even bother with the marinas that have many seasonal residents using their boats to come back and forth. So, come on, we've got to throw everything out on the table and see if we can figure out a solution to this. And it may be a mix of services. Some we get from the district, some we get from private operators. So there we go. Thank you.
CO Gunby.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to caution members of committee about naming specific employees at the district and maybe coming across as negative tone stating that it is their fault personally that things are happening in our township, and it is not. We all have a job to do, and the staff members at the district are just doing their job.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica. I won't mention their names. I'm not sure about doing their job. Thank
Councillor Wianko, you brought this up.
Well,
Look-
yeah, I
look
didn't
how
want
you
to get into a
started.
long- I didn't want to get a long discussion today because I think we all have our own personal feelings about this, but I think we need to start off in the new year with a major meeting on this. If we can think about ideas that we can bring to the table in January, then we can pass some resolutions. If you want to go private, yes, we'll hire a consultant to look at that, or you want to do something else, but let's come in January with some useful resolutions instead of spinning no wheels, what you're doing right now. That's all we're doing, is spinning no wheels and getting our personal issues out. So let's come in January. And I think let's have somebody from the district, at least one member of the district, sit in on our meetings as much as possible, because we may find them helpful in some areas and other areas we won't. But I don't want to exclude them, because I think they do have some useful ideas. They've mentioned a few ideas for some of the, having this lakeside pickup and all that stuff. We maybe want to try that this summer. We may want to have some examples where we might want to try some at the marinas and so on. So let's keep an open mind, keep them involved, but let's get some useful resolutions out on the table in January, and let's get this thing resolved by the end of next year.
All right, now, do we need any resolutions or anything else? Because if we're talking to ourselves, we don't.
It's going to be all garbage.
Only resolution I wanted is that it becomes a standard cow monthly topic. And if the cow's too long, then we should have a special meeting.
Let's name it a solid waste of time.
Thank you, Brian. I go with that.
Ms. Wade?
I was just going to say, through your worship, I don't think a resolution would be needed for that. I think staff can take that back just as direction to ensure that it's a standing item on the cow agenda.
Okay, every
And then
cow will have
pending,
a section called solid waste of time.
excellent.
All right. There I go. Moved by Councillor Wianko, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole does now adjourn at 3:23. I'm presuming there's no other items for discussion. All those in favor? And that is carried, which basically means live streaming will soon stop.